Hey y'all, it's Robin. Welcome back to my channel. Today we are doing another 2022 wrap-up video, and this time we are wrapping up my most anticipated books for the year. So if you didn't see yesterday's video, I wrapped up my 5-star predictions, and today we are wrapping up my most anticipated, which I shared last year. Again, that video will also be linked in all of the places if you do want to go back and watch that for some reason. But I ended up putting 15 books onto this list originally that I was highly anticipating, and then I also created this graphic over on Instagram that had these 15 books plus a couple of extra. So here's a little sneak peek at how many I did and didn't read. First, we're going to go over a couple of stats. So of the 15 books that I put on my official most anticipated list, I read 12 of them, which is an 80% completion rate. So I'm proud of that. But on top of that, one of the 3 books that I didn't finish because it actually got pushed back to next year. So in reality, it was more like 12 out of 14 books, which is an 86%, which I am like exceptionally proud of. I am so proud of myself for actually completing one of these lists. However, I will say that throughout the year, I did make like a conscious effort to pick the books up off this list. This wasn't like accidental. Like, I purposefully kept an eye on this list every single month. The 2 that I did not read, I do own and are sitting next to me, so we'll go over those. I should have read them, I didn't. And then the one that got pushed back, I'm just going to talk about really quick because I'm not going to talk about it again, but that was Feed Them Silence by Lee Mandello, and this did get pushed back to 2023. This does have a cover now and a release date and everything like that. I don't remember if this is on any of my lists for 2023, but I am very excited for it. You already have an arc of it, so this will be coming. It didn't end up getting released in 2022. So that is the book that is just going to kind of get removed from this video. But on top of all of that, on top of actually reading this TBR, I actually really loved this TBR as well. Of the 12 books that I read, I gave 10 of these 5 stars. That is an 83% 5-star rating average, and that's ridiculous to me. There were only 2 books on here that I did not give 5 stars, and one of them was a 4.5. I feel like I have finally figured out my reading taste. I feel like I finally found my footing on what it is that I love to read. And so I was very happy with this TBR in general. I ended up loving all of these. Even some of them were kind of surprising because after I put them on this list, I started losing some interest in it. And then I picked them up and was like shocked by how much I loved it. So without any further intro or rambling, let's get into the wrap up. So first up is the perfect example of one that like I put on this list. I was ridiculously excited for it, and then as the year went, I ended up like really losing interest and I almost didn't read it. And I ended up reading it in a vlog, which I will link up in the cards for, I think it was Becca's 48 Bookathon. And I ended up picking it up just kind of like on a whim because it was the only thing that fit the prompt. And that was Gallant by V.E. Schwab. And I ended up giving it 5 stars. I loved this book. Apparently past me knew exactly what she was talking about when she put it on this list. I don't pick up YA books very often, and when I do, they are usually a certain type of book, and I was unsure if this was going to fit into that, and it totally did. Talk about this a lot, but I like books that are more atmosphere and vibe and writing than like actual plot. I want to just be immersed in this world, and that's what this was. This doesn't have a very strong plot. It doesn't have a very strong ending. It's more like you were just dropped in to this really creepy house and world and following this heroine as she is trying to navigate the horrors of this house. And I loved it. I loved it so much. If you want all of my thoughts, like I said, you can go check out that vlog where I vlogged my entire experience reading this. I listened to this on audiobook and it was horrifying to listen to because the narrator does all of the sound effects from like the journals, and so there's like scratching sounds when things are scribbled, and it was such a cool experience, and this was definitely a surprise favorite. After that was Spells for Forgetting by Adrienne Young. This is an author that I absolutely have loved some of her YA books, and this was her first adult novel, and it was stunning. This is probably my favorite book from Adrienne Young to date, and I really loved The Fable Duet, but this one was so good, and I really hope she continues to write in this like magical adult genre because I loved this. This had a really good mix between the fantasy and magical elements and romance, and it was her stunning writing, which I feel like in this adult book was even more fantastic than in her YA. Like, I feel like she really was able to just kind of like go all in with her beautiful prose. And I loved this. I loved the romance. I loved the magic. This has like my perfect type of magic, which is like unexplained magical nature. And so it's just this like general magical environment without being really controllable. So the island is kind of sentient and there is just a general atmosphere of magic on the island, and it's not really explained. There's no real rules, and like that's my jam. And so I loved this. I loved this one a lot. So definitely a 5 star, and any of her books coming up are probably going to make on a most anticipated list again. Quick coffee break. Next up was one of the first books that I read in 2022, and I actually have a vlog of this one as well, which you can go check out. I will have any videos that I talk about linked down below if you want to go and check them out. But I read Love and Other Disasters by Anita Kelly, and this may have been my first 5 star of the year, and it is still a book that I absolutely love, and it's still a favorite. I just loved this romance so much. And Anita Kelly's next book is also going to be on one of these lists for 2023 because I just loved this so much. Their books tend to feature tropes that like aren't my favorite, but somehow I am completely convinced to love it. So this one features a baking competition, and I do not like any sort of like cooking competition, baking competition things. I don't like to watch them. I don't like to read about them, but this one was so good because the setting, like that competition played a part in the plot, but we didn't dwell on like the minutia of them being in this competition, which I've read other ones where it's just like you're going through them picking out ingredients and like cooking it, going through the judging process, and it's too much detail. And I'm like, I don't need all of that. That doesn't give me anything. And in here, it was perfectly done. The important moments that played into their relationships or character development were highlighted, but we didn't have to go through all of the like detail of them actually doing the baking. And I just really loved that. I loved their romance. I loved their character growth. I loved the like conclusion and how they ended up coming together in the end. I loved this so much, and I can't wait for more books from this author. The next one was a 3-for-1, and that was the Steminist novellas from Ellie Hazelwood, and I again gave all of these 5 stars. I listened to these on audio from Penguin Random House Audio, so they were originally available on audio exclusively, and then they came out on ebook, and now they are going to come out next year as a bind up physically, and I really enjoyed these. I know some people were kind of disappointed in them. They are very short novellas, but I feel like Ellie Hazelwood did a really good job of being able to build backstory without having to tell you the backstory, which I think is really impressive. A lot of these, they had history that made it not feel insta-lovey, and she did it in a way where I wasn't like, I felt like I was missing out on all that detail, and it was able to be told to me in a way that was convincing, especially in, I think it was the second book, because the two main characters are stuck in an elevator, and so you get little flashbacks as they are talking about their history, and I thought it was really exceptionally done. This is another one where it's just like, these books are very entertaining, and I have a good time reading them. And I think sometimes the enjoyment factor of a book is undervalued. So we tend to say, like, if this didn't have very important messaging, if this didn't have exceptional writing, if this didn't surprise me, if it didn't do something new to the genre, then we're not giving it a high rating because, well, it didn't do anything new. And for me, reading is an enjoyment thing. It is something that I do in my life because my life is stressful and I am an anxious human being and I need something to unwind and calm me. Because of that, I use reading as an escape and as an enjoyment factor. And so if a book can just bring me joy, that is a good book to me. And these books brought me joy as I read them. So 5 stars to these one. That was a little tangent that I didn't mean to go on, but you got it anyways. And then we have the lowest rated book on this list. And one of the videos that I decided to add on is actually kind of inspired by this book. I'm not going to spoil it, but essentially it's going to be going through all of the series that I started this year, series that I continued this year, series I finished this year, and just kind of going over which ones I finished, which ones I read, which ones I'm going to continue, and which ones I'm not. And this is kind of the inspiration for the video, and that is The Dragon's Bride by Katee Robert. I want to take a moment so that we can all admire the stunning cover of this book. And I love what Katee Robert kind of started with this book. because now we are getting a lot of like fantasy monster romances with clinch covers, and I'm all for it. I love this style of cover. I know that the illustrated covers are like the big hot thing right now, but there is something so beautiful about these clinch covers. And this one's obviously still illustrated, but it's beautiful. So I do love that this book kind of started that, and I don't plan to unhaul this because I do think it is absolutely stunning. But I gave this 3 stars. When I initially read this, I talked about how like I enjoyed it. I was planning to continue with the series, all of that stuff. But the further away that I get from this book, the more that I just forgot about it and like don't care. So this got a 3 star. It wasn't a bad book. There's nothing bad about this book. I just have no feelings towards this book at all. I have no feelings about it. I barely remember what happened in here, and like I don't want to reread it by any means. This was a monster romance following a heroine who is trying to get out of a abusive relationship, and she makes a deal with a demon and goes to this fantasy world and marries a dragon man. It was a very steamy romance. It was a very sweet romance. Like I said, as I read it, I was like, oh, this is enjoyable. My big complaint with this, as well as some of the other Kitty Robert books, is I don't feel like the world building is existent. And it made a big deal in this one because the world is an important factor to this story. Whereas in some of the other ones, like Bloodline Vampires and things like that, it didn't really matter that you didn't understand the world because the focus was the relationship. And yes, the relationship in this one was important, but this is a continuation following other couples all surrounding a political thing in this world. And I did not understand the world at all. And so it wasn't a favorite. Again, I don't want to spoil the video, but like I'm not continuing on with this series, even though the covers are beautiful, and I do plan to hold on to this one because it is so beautiful, but this one is just not, it wasn't my favorite. And then one of the only books that I don't own physically, because you can't get this book physically and it breaks my heart, but that is The Long Game by Rachel Reed, and this was 5 stars. I love Shane and Isla to death, and I would read a million more books with them. This is part of a like hockey series. I have only read the 2 books featuring Shane and Isla, and I don't plan to read the other ones in the series just because my love for the series is because of these 2 characters. I have heard good things about the rest of the series. I'm just not interested in it. Like I said, my love really lies with these characters more than the world as a whole. So this is part 2 of their romance, and it is essentially what happens after they're happily for now, because they are professional hockey players and there are all of these roadblocks in the way of their happily ever after. They're still keeping their relationship a secret. They are playing on rival teams and they're living in different cities, and it is them trying to figure out how to navigate all of those things. Do they come forward about their relationship? Is that going to ruin their career? Are they going to be able to keep this a secret for their entire lives? And it is them working through all of that. I thought there were beautiful discussions. There's great representation for some like anxiety rep in here. And I really, really love these 2 characters. I would read absolutely anything featuring them. Like it could be them doing their laundry together and I would want to read it. Then the only other book on here that wasn't 5 stars, I actually did talk about in yesterday's video, so I'm not going to sit on this one, but it is Husband Material by Alexis Hall. I did give this one 4.5 stars. Again, I talked about this yesterday, but my unpopular opinion is that the ending fit their messy relationship. I liked this, it wasn't quite up to boyfriend material, so I gave it 4.5 stars. But if you want more thoughts on that, you can go watch yesterday's video where I go into a lot of detail about what I did and didn't like. So all the rest of the books on here are 5 stars. So then we have A Wilderness of Stars by Shea Ernshaw, which was also in yesterday's video. For next year's like most anticipated and 5 star, I think I only have like one overlapping book. I tried to keep them wholly separate so that we don't run into the same situation where a bunch of these overlapped. But I did give this one 5 stars. This was another one where it's not that I lost interest in it, but I lost belief that it was going to be a 5 star. And then it did surprise me that it did still end up being a 5 star. Shea Ernshaw's writing is beautiful. Her characters and worlds are beautiful. Her prose is beautiful. Then we have These Twisted Bonds by Lexi Ryan, and this was the sequel and conclusion to the These Hollow Vows duet, and I loved this duet. This might be one of my favorite duets ever. It is a YA fae fantasy romance with a love triangle, and similar to what I said about like the STEMinist novellas, this is a series that was pure brain candy. Like, it is just super enjoyable. This doesn't have anything powerful to say. This doesn't do anything new with a fae fantasy romance. This is exactly the series that you think it is. We're following a heroine who's kind of like Cinderella-esque, where she comes from nothing, and one of the Fae princes falls in love with her for reasons unknown. She thinks that she's falling in love with a good guy, and then the bad guy comes in and turns out that he's not that bad, and she needs to choose between her two princes. It's exactly what you think it is. I loved every page of it. I loved the angst. I loved the drama. I loved the love triangle. Lexi Ryan does really good love triangles, and I love them every single time. And I just really enjoyed this, and I want a new book from her. I need to check to see if she has anything new coming out in 2023, because I could go for another good Lexi Ryan book. Getting to the first book on this list that I didn't read, and I did actually start this and then never continued, and that was The Oleander Sword by Tasha Suri. And the reason that I did start this, so I started this on audio like right when it came out, and I realized I didn't remember book one. This book is long, 500 pages, and book one is also 500 pages. And I realized that I was going to essentially read a 1,000-page book. And I was like, I don't think I have it in me right now. And so I didn't pick it up that month. And then this just kind of kept getting pushed back. Essentially, I ended up with like a bunch of set TBRs after this came out, and it was just never going to fit in. I am hoping to pick up both books in the new year. However, I might see when book three is coming. If book three is coming next year, I might just binge them all. I might just make it like a whole thing. This is called The Burning Kingdoms. I don't know how many books are in this series. This is one that I haven't read, but I do still desperately want to read it. Another coffee break. The next two books I'm just going to talk about together because, again, they were featured in yesterday's video. So we have Book Lovers by Emily Henry, which is my third book by her, third 5-star by her. Absolutely loved this. And The League of Gentlewomen Witches by India Holton, which is the second book in the series and another 5-star. I think Emily Henry's next book and the next book of this are both on my 5-star for next year, so you will see more from these authors in next year's videos like this. I don't think they're gonna fit. We made it work. But yeah, if you want to hear more about those, you can go check out yesterday's video. I just don't want to repeat myself 100 times, so. And then the final book that I did not read is These Fleeting Shadows by Kate Ellis Marshall. And this is actually another one that I did start. I do have this on audio as well, but here's the thing. I do want to still read this. This isn't like me saying I'm not going to read this. I thought that this was part of the Rules for Vanishing Our Last Echoes series, which they don't look like a series on Goodreads. However, they are told in the same way and they're following the same group. I don't want to spoil it because you don't really understand until the end of Rules for Vanishing what is really happening, and then Our Last Echoes does tie into it, and so it's kind of like a series. And I thought this was part of it. And then I started listening to it on audio, and I realized that this is just a novel, which isn't a bad thing. Even though, like, I bought this on release day, I purposely didn't pick this up because I thought it was tied to the other two. And then when I got into this and I realized it wasn't, I was mad at myself for not realizing that. And so I was like, well, now I don't want to read it. And so I put it down. I do still really want to read it, but I was just mad at myself that I didn't pick this up right away when I bought it because I didn't like open it up and see that it wasn't connected to the other books. So I do still want to read this one, and I actually do have more Kate Ellis Marshall books on my TBR for next year because I am really loving her books and her writing, but I do want the next book that is connected to that. Then the final book on this list was another 5-star, and that was The Dead Romantics by Ashley Poston. This was kind of one of those books that I put on this list that it was kind of on a whim that I put this on there. It was one of those books where the synopsis sounded so intriguing and so interesting and different that I was like, you know what? This is either going to be a massive miss or it's going to be a fantastic read. And it was a fantastic read. I loved this book. I love how Ashley Poston takes some of these like odd and different elements and puts them into a romance. So this one is following a heroine who falls in love with a ghost. She is a ghost writer, and she falls in love with her editor, who is a ghost. And it is so well done. It is kind of just like Heaven meets Book Lovers. I loved this a whole lot. And she has another book coming out next year that also has a different odd twist. I think it's a time slip one, kind of like The Lake House. And I think our heroine is falling in love with somebody who is like 7 years in the past, and somehow they keep seeing each other in their apartment. And so I think Ashley Poston is just doing really interesting things in the adult romance genre, and I am loving, absolutely loving it. So that is a wrap on all 15 books that were on my most anticipated list. I do have a new version of this list and my 5-star predictions list coming later this week, and I'm really hoping that I can replicate this in the upcoming year because I like being able to read the books off my TBR. I put them on my TBR because I'm excited about them, and I try not to like lose sight of them throughout the year. And so I really like making these lists so that throughout the year I can kind of look back on them and see the books that I was anticipating and keep those in mind throughout the upcoming months as I am building a TBR or a possibility pile so that I'm not forgetting about the books that I was excited about. Let me know if you made one of these videos in the new year and let me know how you did on it. I'm really curious to see how people did on their like anticipated releases and predictions and 22 books to read in 2022 lists. So thank you so much for watching, and I will catch you all in tomorrow's video. Bye!